My name is Alyssa Grant. I am 40 years old, and when Mom told me, "You'll understand when you're older," she handed me another absence dressed as advice. If betrayal has ever silenced you, share your story in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more. They rehearsed family in a way that always left me on the outskirts. Rosa, my mother, ran a successful fundraising charity. Her flaw was optics, presence only when cameras clicked. Mark, my father, owned a mid-sized contracting business. He traded attention for checks and mistook money for apology. Lena, my sister, 32, polished, an influencer with a neat grin and an appetite for being first in line. She traded authenticity for applause. Aunt Jo was different. Retired nurse, thrift store habits. The one who brought casseroles at midnight and kept the honest side of our family alive. On the day they booked the 5-star trip for Lena, the table glittered with china and excuses. "We have to choose," Rosa said, smoothing the napkin between her fingers like a script. "Lauren needs the rest. She's been so stressed." I smiled and let the sentence settle where sentences usually settle in our family. On my plate, cold. After laughter and a final clink, I picked up the small brass spare key I had put in a bowl years ago. I left it squarely on the center of the table. I closed the front door the way people close chapters, with the calm that comes when you have decided you will not be shrunk by someone else's narrative. I packed a bag and left town without drama. No guilt, no scene. Just a slow exhale. I booked a lawyer for paperwork I expected I might need one day. I rented a cheap room near a train station and let the rhythm of tracks replace the noise their absence had always been. I felt heavy, then lighter. I felt small, then steady. I slept without waiting for a text. A week later, I received a group text. "Return Sunday." "Don't be dramatic," I answered with one sentence. "I left the key where you'll find it." Mom typed, "You will understand." Lena sent a laughing emoji. Mark called, voice measured. "We're worried about you." I smiled at my phone and tucked the device away. When they returned, the house awaited them, but not as they had left it. Their perfume would find a new meaning there. When Mom opened the door, she didn't expect the house to answer back. I arrived back 2 days before they did. The porch light was still the soft yellow Mom preferred. The roses in the front bed had been pruned as if on schedule. The house smelled of lemon oil and the faint ghost of Chanel No. 5. I walked through each room, knowing the rhythms of this place better than anyone because I had grown up cataloging where people left mistakes. If you're watching this, drop a comment if you've ever left quietly and returned with plans. Hit like and subscribe. Sometimes silence is the plan. First, I changed the locks. Not dramatically. A clean job done by a contractor who did not ask questions. I kept a record and sent a notice to the old keyholder address. New locks installed. Please contact property management. I rerouted mail to a secure box and arranged a meeting with the local trustee who handled the family trust. I had learned that physical absence could be papered over. Absence combined with paperwork is hard to pretend away. Then I walked the accounts. My father's contractor account had a joint line that allowed one-click transfers to personal accounts, a feature he'd bragged about as convenience. I called the bank and requested brief holds for security review and verification on large transfers. I did not hide their money. I made it visible under a new light. I sent notice to the trustee. Alyssa Grant requests audit support. We will review account access. The trustee replied, careful and neutral. Acknowledged. We will coordinate. Aunt Jo arrived 2 evenings later with a casserole and a sad smile. She took my hands and said, "You always did the right thing quietly. Now you're doing it loudly enough that they can't pretend." She had kept receipts over the years, a jar of receipts and voice memos that tracked moments when I had bailed them out. She handed me a bundle of notes, dates, doctor calls, unpaid invoices. "People forget who showed up," she said, "and documents don't." We made copies and put them in 3 different safe locations. I installed security cameras in such a way that they looked like old holiday decorations. Small, compact, unobtrusive. They recorded audio and video and uploaded to cloud storage I controlled. Not to humiliate in public, but to ensure there would be proof when my boundaries required it. Finally, I prepared the house to be both the same and not the same. I left their photographs in their frames but switched the albums to show different years first. I placed a printed notice on the kitchen corkboard. Community inspection scheduled. Kitchen inventory to be completed. The note looked mundane. It would compel attention when they returned. They thought they were coming home to the same rooms, but the rooms had quietly learned to speak. Sunday morning arrived with jet lag and perfume. I hid in the upstairs guest room and watched as their car pulled up the drive. Lauren spilled out of the back seat with a sun hat and a laugh. Mark carried a small leather bag. Rosa had a postcard glow. They walked up the path, and I listened to the sound of their shoes on the steps, like applause for a show they had written themselves. If betrayal has ever taught you to catalog moments, say so below and subscribe. They opened the door and paused. Mom's eyebrows rose. "Why is the key on the table?" she asked, voice a practiced note. Lena smiled, quick, dismissive. Cassie must have been cleaning. Mark extended his hand like a conductor testing the audience. The house was tidy in the obvious places. Under the kitchen table, however, a small card waited for them where I had placed it earlier. "Welcome back. Please check the foyer camera for visitor log." They fumbled with the foyer tablet I had installed disguised as a picture frame. The entry showed a week of visitors. The clock times of a handyman, a contractor, Aunt Jo, and one ID entry. Alyssa Grant, 1407, lock change completed. Mom's smile thinned. Mark scrolled and found the email thread with the trustee. Lena clicked open a notification and a ledger preview displayed. Recent flagged transfers, audit initiation, and an item marked pending, ownership verification. Laughter stuck in their throats. Guests in the neighborhood arrived later, and someone, always someone, did what families do. Tried to smother drama with small talk. But the picture frame kept repeating the tableau. My name, the date, the action. The conversation thinned. Rosa tried to steer to photos from the resort, as if distraction were a balm. Lena posed in the doorway for a selfie. I let her. The camera caught everything. A neighbor whispered, "Did you do this, Cass?" Aunt Jo's hands rose in proof. "She's put things right," she said simply. People who had seen me standing in unpaid lines nodded. The air shifted from smug to unsettled. That evening, as dessert plates cleared, I asked quietly, "Do you remember the spare key?" They told versions that suited them. "You must have misplaced it. We assumed you had it. We thought you stayed." Each answer sounded like a defense. I looked at them and said nothing. I set the record down in a way they couldn't swipe away. I played a short video clip on the living room TV of the bank call acknowledging audits, and then a text thread where Mark had assured a vendor of immediate payment. Faces drained, and then Lena's phone lit up with a headline she could not delete. I did not leak anything publicly, but the ledger and the trustee were a lever. A responsible local reporter picked up a dry, factual notice about a trustee audit, mundane until you read the attachments. The attachments, filed correctly, pointed to a string of transfers that begged questions. The headline ran, "Local Contractors Trust Under Audit. Trustee seeks clarity on transfers." It was neutral. It was legal. It was devastating to the family narrative. If you're watching, tell me below. When did you last watch a family truth unfold? And subscribe, because publicness is a form of protection. Mark read the article in the kitchen, his hands trembling ever so slightly. "This is a mistake," he said aloud. His voice had always been louder to cover shreds. Rosa phoned a PR consultant she knew from fundraising. Lena posted a flippant comment about wild rumor season. But under the announcements, creditors called. Lenders asked for immediate reconciliations. One creditor asked for proof of holding assets Mark had claimed existed. The law's slow teeth found a raw spot. They blamed me within 3 hours. "How could you?" Mark accused when I stepped into the dining room while calls buzzed in the other room. He paced words like accusations. "You could have told us, Alyssa. We could have done this quietly." He looked at me with the old entitlement. Expectant, indignant. I had been the family fault cushion for decades. Now the cushion was asking for receipts. I handed him one. It was a sheaf of receipts Aunt Jo had kept, and letters from vendors who had waited. I read aloud the dates, unpaid invoices, phone logs of unanswered pleas. Rosa's hands shook. "We were busy," she muttered. "We thought it was temporary." Lena had nothing but a scarf and a nauseous smile. Then the trustee called from his office. He said calmly into the speaker, "Ms. Grant has requested a full audit, and we must pursue proper discovery. We will require cooperation within 14 days. The line clicked. Silence sagged. The rehearsed faces slid unmasked. By midnight, the first subpoena arrived, and no one in the house knew what to erase. The subpoena looked clinical and final, taped to the fridge like an invitation to audit your life. The trustee wanted account ledgers, contracts, and explanations of intercompany transfers. Lenders stiffened their voices. Some long-promised donors asked for clarity. The family was forced into a transparency they never wanted. If betrayal has left you with a list of names, comment below, and subscribe for stories that turn silence into armor. I sat with the documents and thought about the years of tiny kindnesses that had been turned into family expectation. I drafted a single condition I would accept: full cooperation and a public commitment to a community fund that would support families who had been left to manage alone. It was not dramatic. It was structural. It was the price of return. Mark begged, pleaded, promised. "We can handle this in private," he said. "We'll pay what's owed." He offered checks that cleared in draft, but vanished in practice. Rosa wept in apologies that smelled of perfume and reheated remorse. Lena tried to apologize where social currency mattered. She posted humble photos that had the soft shine of staged humility. I asked for signatures. Their public commitment to the trust, auditing access, and a restitution plan for debts proven. They signed. Not because they felt shame exactly, but because continuing to conceal would cost more than confession, and in signing they made the change public. The town noticed. Old friends sent careful messages. Aunt Jo wept a little, and then set to work helping to manage details. She had the moral stamina to keep going. I did not gloat. I kept everything precise. I wanted proof, not performance. I filed the request with the trustee, forwarded copies to legal counsel, and placed a neutral public notice in the local paper. Trust audit in progress. Community stakeholders invited to submit relevant information. It was surgical. At night, when the house quieted, Lena came to my room and said, small and drunk with regret, "I didn't know." I asked her to list every time she had been absent when people needed help. She could not. The ledger did not forgive. It only kept the record. 2 weeks later, a creditor's representative knocked on the door with a list and a ledger that matched mine. The knock that morning was polite and precise. A representative for a major supplier stepped into the foyer and asked to see records. He leafed through invoices and looked at faces that had once been untroubled by accountability. The press smelled momentum. Donors paused. Board members requested emergency meetings. If you're here, share one boundary you set and how it changed you. Subscribe, boundaries become structures. The trustees' review uncovered small but consistent diversions. Funds paid to questionable vendors, invoices duplicated, and unexplained transfers. Some of it could be explained by paperwork errors. Some of it could not. The local bank placed temporary holds. Mark's contracting windows were suddenly watched by auditors. Lena's influencer partners pulled back pending clarity. Rosa's fundraiser rebooked events only after extra assurances. The family gasped at each new line. Some called lawyers. Some called priests. Some called friends and asked for rescue. They had been comfortable with a narrative that paid for benign neglect. When the ledger became public, the comfort evaporated. Ethan, a now adult neighbor whose job had been tutoring in our town, approached me quietly. "You did the hard math," he said. He had seen the slow erosion of safety that happens when care is assumed to be infinite. You made it count. Aunt Jo continued to feed dinners to the housekeepers and nurses who had helped over the years. She was small, steady, and more influential than anyone who chased applause. At an emergency meeting, Mark attempted a charismatic speech about mismanagement and the need for unity. People were less persuaded by speeches now. Men and women who had been on the receiving end of long silences brought their receipts and their weight. The trustee proposed reconstitution of the board, independent oversight, and public reporting requirements. No one in our family had expected such machinery to be applied to them. Lena came to the back room, tears in her eyes. "I thought being pretty would fix things," she confessed. Her confession was a child's version of truth. I did not punish her. I asked for steps. We arranged for counseling and demanded an operational audit for her initiatives. Late that night, the trustee emailed an unexpected notice. An external report had found evidence of more than clerical errors. The external report was precise and unforgiving. Once an outside auditor begins to look for patterns, patterns appear. The auditor flagged irregularities that required restitution and governance overhauls. Large donors requested meetings and some withheld future support. Board members resigned rather than field uncomfortable questions. If you've ever had to force a small change to be permanent, tell me below. And subscribe for more stories of structure over spectacle. The town watched. I watched my family adjust the way a man adjusts a broken tie. Quick fixes, then panic. Mark, tried to maintain control, but found his voice thinner. Rosa called me, voice raw, and asked whether we could speak privately. I agreed. I told her I wanted repairs that would outlast sentiment. The trust funded, audited every quarter, an independent committee to oversee charitable funds, and a public report on governance. She agreed on paper. Schemes unspooled. A few advisors were asked to resign. Bank holds were made permanent in some cases. The trustee required that all charitable distributions be preceded by independent verification. The family name could remain, but the command to act without witness was gone. People wept, and then did a strange thing. They began to call neighbors who had borne burdens without fame and offered restitution. It felt small and awkward and right. I facilitated some of those calls. The ledger had become a set of instructions for repair. It did not return lost time. It did prevent the same pattern from eating the next generation. I thought about what revenge would have looked like if I had wanted spectacle. Instead, I chose infrastructure, laws, oversight, requirements that would make their absence costly. It was colder, slower, and more lasting. It required patience, and the kind of paperwork that bends power. The final public act came on a small weekday. A press release announcing the trustees' settlement terms, the agreed restitution schedule, and the establishment of a community resilience fund. It named some donors and some projects. It promised transparency going forward. On the same day, Lena stood before a small crowd and read the first public acknowledgement she had ever typed herself. We held a modest gathering to announce the community fund. Nurses, neighbors, and small business owners came. The hall smelled like coffee and something kinder than regret. Work that helps. I invited Aunt Jo to speak first. She read a short note about stubborn kindness and the need for structures that keep care from being optional. Have you ever forgiven someone who didn't deserve it? Tell me below, and subscribe for more true tales. My mother and Lena attended. Mark did not. He sent a letter. Rosa read it aloud, a measured apology filed with legal counsel, part contrition and part protection. Lena nervously delivered a short statement about learning and growth. She looked at me afterward with eyes that finally had depth beyond the camera lens. After the event, Lena took my hand. "I don't know if I deserve this," she whispered. I answered simply, "Deserve isn't the point." "Do the work," she nodded. She had signed the restitution documents. She had enrolled in the counseling program. Her influencers would see authenticity now in how she managed mistakes. That night, when the town doors closed and the hall emptied, I sent one final message to the family group chat. Trust funded. Audit scheduled. We will not allow erasure again. I hit send. Then I blocked the chat. I walked home alone and unlocked my front door with my own key. It fit easily. I stepped into a quiet that felt like an armature. I thought about silence and how I had once mistaken its softness for weakness. I had been patient enough to build a system. I had been brave enough to make it public. The revenge I wanted was never spectacle. It was architecture, the way you rearrange incentives so neglect costs more than presence. The sweetest moment was not headline glory. It was watching their comfortable illusions fold into obligations with teeth. I lay down that night and slept without waking for the first time in years. In the morning, I planted a small lavender bush by the front porch, a tiny permanent thing in a house that had finally learned to keep watch. Revenge punch. Final line. Structure outlasts their shallow plea.